Yeah, fair to say. Well, I'll go ahead and mention that I know y'all have opinions. I see you talking about this in the chat, and I would really love to encourage you to give us a call. Again, we're at 512-991-9242. If you think that this is all total bullshit, call and tell us about it. I mean, this is a important topic, so correct us where we're wrong and let us know what you think about this, because I know that it is so contrary to the culture in so many ways, but is sincerely important ideas for us to be talking about.
Absolutely, 100%. And even though I find myself as like an educator, an advocate, and like an expert in this area, I'm always still learning and growing.
Sure.
So having these types of conversations with you and other people is important. These conversations is what stimulates any type of change.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, it's taken generations to do this, but as a culture, I feel like we've finally come around to the idea that being queer doesn't, like, make you sick in some way, but being queer in a homophobic culture is kind of universally traumatizing. So as a therapist who in particular works with fat people, can you talk at all about some of the symptomology, some of the struggles that you are seeing in people?
Oh, absolutely. Being a fat person in a quote-unquote skinny world, even though if you statistically look, fat people are the quote-unquote normal size, the size that we see every day, but that's not talked about. But being a fat person in a skinny world, I mean, what that ends up doing to people is creating these, identity issues of, people not loving themselves, people dealing with anxiety or depression when they're around people who are skinny or people who are at a store or at a club and whatnot. They get very self-conscious of themselves. And that can even go further from there and turn into things like addiction. We see people dealing with, addiction when it comes to exercising, addiction when it comes to, diets and fad diets and things like that. We also see people dealing with things like eating disorders because of it. Anywhere from just disordered eating, emotional eating. We're all kind of guilty of emotional eating, but it can go from anywhere from that to something much more severe like bulimia, anorexia, and things like that.
Yeah.
And because of that, people completely change their lives. Who they are, what they do, the way they interact with the world around them. And that's because we're a fat person living in a skinny world. Just that culture in and of itself can do all that to a person.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to take a moment here to just acknowledge that whatever the healthiest weight for you actually is, that it is much healthier to be at a weight, even if it is above where maybe your genetic set point would be at its most healthiest. It's better to be over that point than to be bouncing up and down. Right. And it's dramatically better to be overweight than underweight. I mean, is all that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think a big part of looking into working with individuals who deal with, the weight issues is not only are we looking at culture, society, and everything like that, but we also have to look directly at home, how a person was raised, what a person was told, and those things directly affect a person, their views on weight, their ideas about food and exercise and so forth. And then therefore that causes the underweight, extreme overweight, or anything in between.
Or the bouncing back and forth as you get on that diet and then you finally get to the weight that you're supposed to be at. But that is really missing the point, especially since your body is that rubber band that's going to naturally settle back at that set point. At least if you're not stretching that rubber band out too much by changing your weight over and over again.
Oh, 100%. Exactly. And people have a tendency to not realize that or think about that. We naturally are going to gain and lose weight all throughout our life, but based off of lifestyles, what we're doing, our opportunities that are afforded to us, the opportunities we don't have, and just a number of other things. And so when people can stop for a moment and think about that from that type of perspective, it really brings new light to everything.
Sure. Well, I mean, everybody's personal pain, everybody's story is going to be different. But in general, when you're working with fat folks on body acceptance, is it meaningfully different than working with other types of body dysmorphia or other forms of acceptance issues?
Yeah, I know for myself, when I work with other fat folks on body positivity, fat liberation, or anything revolved around that, for me, it is very meaningful and very different because I can really relate and I can really understand what they're doing, going through, feeling, and so forth. Whereas if I'm working with a person who is in a skinny body, it's a little bit different, but I still understand where they're coming from.
Sure.
And no matter what, if I'm working with somebody who is in a skinny body or in a fat body, I always take that slow approach of acceptance, love, empathy, and understanding why we are the way we are because of the things around us. And so we have to start small. We have to start slow. We have to understand that this is a journey. This isn't just like a 100-meter race. Is that a short race? I don't know. I'm not a runner. But this is something that takes time. We have to undo all of these years of oppression, shame, and judgment. And so no matter who you work with as a therapist, we just have to start with where they're at and just take that slow ride with them.
Yeah, fair to say. So I kind of used the terms almost interchangeably just now, but can you walk us through a little bit of the distinction between dysphoria, dysmorphia, and just sort of like general self-loathing or self-criticism?
Yeah, so like self-criticism is just, the way I see it is just kind of you're looking past a mirror and you're just like, oh, I don't like the way my hair looks, or I don't like the way this fits on my clothes or anything like that. That's just general self-criticism. Where it goes beyond that is body dysmorphia, which just to kind of provide a little bit of an overview for everybody, body dysmorphia is more the diagnosis of a person who is dealing with extreme issues around weight. Body dysphoria is the actual feeling that a person gets.
Okay, sure.
So the feeling of like
that sensation, that
uncomfortable,
personal experience.
Yeah, exactly. And so when people are talking about like, I feel really weird in my body, that's body dysphoria. When people are doing the extreme weight loss, the extreme exercising and things like that, that's body dysmorphia.
Okay, well, and then just broadly speaking, what does treatment generally look like?
So treatment, as you know, for any person we work with, it's going to be very highly individualized.
Sure.
It's always meeting a person where they're at, and taking that person-centered approach is going to be super important. Also, I think what a lot of therapists need to remember is it's not just about the body and weight. There's so much more added into it. So understanding intersectional identities, how a person's culture, genetics, home life, sexual orientation, religion, everything ties into that. And so I think that as a therapist, I take that approach of when I'm working with this individual, I need to be able to understand all those aspects of them and how it affects their ideas, understanding of weight.
Sure.
And then from there, usually most of the times I really start more towards body positivity because a lot of people are not at a place where they're ready for fat liberation, or maybe they just don't want to do that. Maybe they just want to have more of that body love. And so I usually start at that place and work with the person on changing their language, how they talk to themselves, how they talk to others. I usually work with people on understanding how society or their family or their environment around them gives them those unhealthy ideas.
Yeah, what those social pressures look like and how to recognize them as they happen and not necessarily become consumed by them.
100%, exactly. And then from there, once we get to a place where a person starts to have more body positivity and see themselves in a better light, if they want to take that next step into fat liberation, that's when we talk about systems of oppression, how they do things, how to be able to fight that, and whatnot. And so, again, it's a slow process. I know for myself, This is a journey I've been on my entire life. I continue to do it with my own therapist because society is very difficult. Again, a fat person living in a skinny world, sometimes it can feel very alone. But as I continue to do my journey, I share that with others, specifically my clients, when therapeutically appropriate. And it makes a big difference to make that connection. The connection is really key in this relationship when working on body image.